Welcome to the Tuesday Review. I'm Nathan, as always, joined by James and Callum, and special guest Alum in the studio. How you going, boys?
Back
What's
again,
going
twice
on?
in a row.
Twice in a row. We are so lucky to have him back in the studio again.
But I haven't watched the movie, so I mean it's not much of a loss.
That's
yeah,
fine.
Considering what we're going to talk about today.
You didn't miss much.
So we are talking about the new Disney Plus.
No, Marvel. It is. We watched it on Disney Plus.
Yeah, but Disney
Wait, it's on
Plus,
Disney
Marvel.
Plus?
We watch it through Disney Plus.
yeah, but the new Marvel,
movie.
MCU.
But you could also call it the new Disney Plus film because it is streaming through Disney Plus.
we'll talk about that. Yeah,
Is it not at the cinemas or is it?
It is in
no, it
cinemas.
is. Yeah. So yeah, it's in the new Marvel movie.
The new Marvel movie.
Yeah, Black Widow.
Black Widow, which is a prequel.
Several
kind
years
of.
too late at this point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
way too late.
It takes place both in the sort of younger years of what's her name?
It basically,
Natasha Romenough.
Natasha Romenough.
it takes place right after Civil War.
Yeah, we
Pretty
get
much.
flashbacks.
Yeah, a couple of flashbacks.
few flashbacks, but
But yeah, so we've got a lot to get through because listeners, we've got a doozy for you this week. And so I'm going to be rambling and yelling and carry on, and I apologize in advance, and I apologize.
We'll
to
try
all-
and reel them in.
yeah. Black Widow. We've talked about this before, but it warrants repeating. Black Widow was introduced into the MCU. Is a fan favorite comic book character since
Yeah.
the 60s, but was introduced in the MCU in Iron Man 2. 11 years ago. Since then, fans have been telling Marvel, we want a Black Widow movie. We want a Black Widow movie. Where's our Black Widow movie? And Marvel, they was like, no, not yet. People aren't ready. Da, 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 da. And we kept saying, we want a Black Widow movie. Blah, blah, Black Widow movie. Then Wonder Woman comes out in 2017.
and that was quite successful.
And that was successful. And that was there had been other solo superhero films, but that was like the first really big main blockbuster one.
Yeah,
And it was like, well, Marvel, you were winning the superhero movie war against DC, but they beat you to the solo
yeah.
female hero film.
They got that milestone first.
Yeah. And they were like, and we're like, you know, come on, where's our Black Widow movie? And they were like, no, maybe, you know, da 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 da.
We'll give you Captain Marvel first.
Then they gave us Captain Marvel in 2018 or 2019, and that wasn't a good movie,
No.
but it happened.
Yeah.
And people were like, come on, man. And then Endgame came out, and they killed off Black Widow. Spoiler alert for all the Marvel movies. And it's like, well,
What's the point now?
yeah. And then they announced, hey everyone, we're doing a Black Widow movie, yay. And I was like, well, what's the point?
Yeah.
You wasted 10 years, you killed her off, and now you're giving us a weird consolation prize.
Yeah.
And we said before that when we saw the trailer for Black Widow, it was supposed to come out over a year ago, but then COVID happened, so it's been delayed until now. When the trailer came out like a year ago, we were like, too little, too late.
Yeah.
We don't, like, you killed her off, like, what's the
point of this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, come on. So we're at this stage now where it's...
Unfortunately, they announced it, so therefore they have to make it.
Yeah, and
You
then
know
they're
what I mean?
like... So we get the movie. Look, I'm just going to say it's not good. It's a bad movie. It's unnecessary. It doesn't really add anything new.
Yeah.
And it's a waste of time.
Yeah. It probably is the worst Marvel movie so far.
It's close to near the bottom, yeah.
What did you put at the bottom then?
I really hate Captain Marvel.
Very good.
Yeah.
We're all in agreement then.
Yeah.
Send your complaints somewhere else.
Captain Marvel's better than this though.
You like Captain Marvel, so you're biased against, and you know.
At least this movie, it makes mistakes with its villain, but it doesn't, in my opinion, seem to hate some of the characters. But I feel like they did in Captain Marvel.
Yeah, I mean,
So I would say Marvel's still at the
They
bottom.
both have similar problems,
Yeah.
which
but
we'll get
Marvel's
into.
still at the bottom, and
Yeah.
it'll stay there for probably a long time.
But anyway, and you know, it's also a shame because they're the two female-led
Yeah.
movies, and so it's easy for people to go, well, you didn't like them because they were female. It's like, no, it's because they were bad movies.
Yeah, and the problem
the people
is
making them weren't thinking about making a good movie. They were just like, we got to churn this out quickly.
It's funny because, obviously, we review movies for the show.
Yeah.
And we're not professional in the sense, of course, that we don't get paid like some people do get paid handsomely to review movies professionally.
We're not corporate shills. We tell the truth.
Exactly, no. That's the problem. We tell it as we see it. Yeah. And sometimes that means we like movies that other people don't like. Sometimes we don't like movies that everyone else thinks is the best.
Yeah.
And this is one of those instances.
Sorry.
This is one of those instances where you look at the reviews for Black Widow and it's pretty positive across the board for like the big reviewers. They're saying excellent, really well done. Fights the patriarchy, power.
Yeah. I mean, some of these.
But then you go to the user reviews and some of the people are like, I thought it sucked. And I'm like, I feel like it's one of those situations where some people can't really be objective because there's an inbuilt need to say positive things about a movie.
You mean like the part where Rotten Tomatoes
that's so important.
People's reviews?
Yeah, because the movie's so important to the user base.
Yeah.
You can't. Do you really want to say Black Widow sucks?
I think we've talked about this before. There are implicit and there have been allegations of basically threats by the major studios and companies behind the movies to negative reviewers, being like, we need, if you don't give this a positive review, you might
get
not
free tickets,
get access to like their next movies and that kind of stuff. So I'm sure there's business dealings that go on behind the scenes that may or may not reflect on the reviews that get written.
Yeah, you don't want to say bad things about a movie that's so important to people who want Black Widow.
I remember when Last Jedi came out and there were all these great reviews and we were really confused as to why. And we were like, oh, Disney has to be paying the reviewers. And there was this conspiracy. And it's like, and all the reviewers were like, of course they're not paying us. It's ridiculous. And I'm like, well, of course, like, even if that's true and they're not getting paid and they're not corporate shills, there is a cultural atmosphere surrounding the movies like this.
It's like a necessity to like it.
It's almost, like, it's either a necessity or you feel like if you don't like it, then something's wrong.
Yeah.
What was that? There was that movie with a certain film reviewer, popular in the UK, reviewed
Skyscraper.
No, not Skyscraper. Same reviewer, but it was the Oprah movie.
Oh yeah.
And it was terrible. And he had to do a certain reviewer. Had to
Wrinkle in Time.
Yeah. And a certain reviewer had to do a review for it.
Yeah.
And he was struggling to say positive things about it. He was like, some of the scenes look pretty. 8 out of 10.
That's the thing is, like, we don't mince words. We're not worried about offending people. Like, if a movie's bad, it's bad, and we will say it's bad.
And we'll explain to our best ability why it's bad.
Exactly.
We're not going to just say it's bad, just be like...
And we like to deep dive into why it's bad. And it's not bad because of surface reads that nerds like to argue about on the net. We're like, it's bad because the filmmaking is bad.
Yeah. And it can genuinely be bad just because of Brie Larson. But
I don't agree. I think she could have been really good. That was a director writer problem.
You can only do
but you
so
just
much
see
with the
her
best
attitude
script.
outside of
that's
the
also
film.
we won't talk about that.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's move on.
Enough preamble.
Yeah, that was a long preamble that shouldn't have gone that long.
That's all I could partake in.
Full spoilers for Black Widow. It's Marvel.
MCU
You're either in or you're out.
Yeah.
You're going to see it if you've seen all the other ones. If you haven't seen all the other ones, there's no point in choosing this one as your one to see.
Well, straight off the bat, it's pretty bad as well. The credits are kind of boring straight off the bat. The opening credits were like really...
So the movie starts in a flashback in 1995 where young Natasha is in America with her younger sister, who's not her real sister, but
adopted,
and her two parents, who are actually all undercover Russian agents.
Yeah.
Which is a cool idea. I watched The Americans. It was awesome. But that took place during the Cold War, and this is 1995. I know stuff like this probably still happens, but
it's kind of out of place. Yeah,
it's dated or whatever the word is, and anachronistic or whatever.
Yeah, anachronistic. Yeah.
But anyway, they're in America. They're living a normal life. But then they get found out, and so they have to quickly leave. And then the family's broken up, and Natasha's taken back to the Red Room, which is the Black Widow school, which we heard about in Age of Ultron, I believe. Where she's trained to be this perfect
James
assassin.
Bond, James
Yeah.
Bond essentially. It's like James Bond school for
Sort of.
MCU characters.
Yeah, but it's like all female like
Yeah.
assassins, and that's where they trained her. And like so yeah, that happens, and then it cuts to like a weird indie like folk cover of Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Yeah, that's so weird.
And I was just like, who chose the music for this movie? Also, The Family, their song that they like to sing is Bye Bye Miss
Yeah.
America. And I was like, really? Like, this is
It's so
too on the
weird.
nose. Like, oh, they're not a real Americans. Get it?
Yeah.
It's so
Out of-
tone deaf?
Yeah, tone deaf. Like it feels like they're pulling suggestions out of a hat and just applying them to scenes.
Yeah.
It's just the easiest song to
Yeah,
choose.
yeah.
It's just like the cheesiest.
So
And this actually pretty much applies across the board for the film, but it's like they're just getting people into what's the word, limericks. It's like, how can we form a movie? It's like David Lynch said, you get eight cards, you
Yeah.
write something that happens on 8 cards, you got a movie. It's like that if they were like wrote down generic spy
it definitely
stuff.
felt like paint by the numbers. Like they need a song to bring the family
Yeah.
together.
But it feels like
But
there
it
was
has to be an American song because
Yeah.
they're not real Americans. Wink, wink.
Yeah, it feels like there was no one who was like, I don't know if this is the right word, consistency. There was like there's no internal consistency in terms of the songs. It's like they just had some guys like, oh yeah, like Smells Like Teen Spirit's a good song.
no,
Put that
no,
on.
it-
Oh,
it's
Natasha's
not-
a
it's the
teenager in
consistency-
this scene.
yeah,
it's
that's-
Teenage Spirit by Nirvana.
Yeah,
That's the consistency. It's not that there wasn't consistency. It's that the consistency is stupid.
Yeah,
It's
Yeah.
the choices were
They have
stupid.
the songs don't reflect much of what's actually happening in the movie so much as they're just an
Yeah.
observation.
But anyway,
of
this is like the first
setting.
5 minutes. Who cares? Right? So, I mean, the problem with, like, generally, prequels aren't a good idea. We don't need to
Yeah.
see how a certain character got to where they are. If we saw a character in a movie, that's where they were supposed to be. Like, that's
Yeah.
the more interesting part of their life. Their origin might inform their character, but do we really need to see it? So you're making a dangerous thing when you go back and try to fill in all the gaps.
yeah.
Also, by doing that, you have to start retconning things and changing things and explaining things. And it's like it has ripple effects. And this
Yeah.
is why Captain Marvel didn't work. And this is why Black Widow doesn't work. 2 prequel movies that start to change the rest of the 25
it changes-
plus movie
it
saga.
changes the context of the character.
Yeah.
yeah.
And also, you start explaining little stupid things that don't need to explain. Like, how did Black Widow get her vest in Infinity War?
Yeah.
Black Widow tells you.
Excuse me?
What?
Yeah.
Why was that a plot point? Like, I
Yeah.
know this is just a stupid thing, but it's like, what? Like, it's dumb. Like, we
Yeah.
don't need any of this. If you are going to do a prequel, do something that really fleshes out the world and the character so much. It's such a weird choice to just have this movie take place right after Civil War and like nothing really happens, and then at the end, right before the authorities come to arrest Black Widow, she's like, oh, I got to go find Steve Rogers.
yeah.
And then it ends. I was like, well, that's a much more interesting movie leading into Infinity War that I would have rather have seen.
But now that, being in the place that we're in, where canonically speaking, she's dead.
Yeah.
It would have been much better for them to do like before, like the MCU. Like, what was she doing on her
I
own,
thought, yeah.
separate from
They should have
all the
definitely
events that came after.
they should have definitely leaned more on like the Red Room, her early years.
Yeah.
But then you have to de-age her or cast a younger actor or something like that, and so they probably didn't want to do that. Also, because they killed her off, they now have the hard job of replacing her with another Black Widow or a similar counterpart,
Yeah.
which I think this movie was trying to do with Yelena. Florence Pugh, by the way, who plays Yelena, is the best part of this movie. She's great.
She is much better, yeah, than her counterpart in Natasha in this movie.
Yeah, but the movie doesn't do a good job of really setting her up as the next Black Widow or the next...
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you are going to make a prequel that
Actually, no,
sets
David
up...
Harbour comes pretty close.
He's pretty good. But, like, if you're going to make a prequel that sets up the person who's going to take on the mantle moving forward, make the movie just about that.
Yeah.
This movie really awkwardly tries to shoehorn in all this, like, she's got her adopted father, David Harbour's character, Red Guardian, her adopted mother, Melina, played by Rachel Weisz, and her adopted sister, Yelena. And it's like they're shoehorning all this.
Yeah,
I'm like,
I think,
cut all this out.
I think the problem is they were probably at this point they were probably contractually obligated to give ScarJo a standalone film, and they also wanted to deal with setting up the next. So they were trying to put these.
That's the thing, right? If you need to do the film, and which you should have done years and years ago when people asked for it, and you need to introduce the new Black Widow or someone who's going to take over the mantle or something like that, then just make the movie about that.
Yeah, it's two different movies they're trying to make.
This movie then she has a family. That's a theme now because
realistically, it should have been
it should have been about family.
It should have been setting up the next Black Widow, but instead they're contractually obligated to make it about Scarlett Johansson, probably.
No, but it's not about. I'm not talking about the contractual obligation.
No. I know you're not. But that's the bind they're in. Because it's like they're trying to, obviously with
they did like when we were watching this movie, I said, this movie is so bad. It's not a case of they should have done this a bit differently. They should have done
the whole thing needs to be erased.
The whole thing needs to be rewritten page one.
Yeah,
and part of that rewriting,
but what I'm saying,
is still making it about Black Widow, but in making it about Yelena and Black Widow's relationship and why Yelena will become
that's what I'm saying. But
Black
it should have been less about the we'll say the old Black Widow with Natasha, and more about the new.
That just brings in another problem where it's like you're gonna finally make the standalone film of a dead character, and having to introduce her counterpart, and it's like, so it doesn't really matter what you do with it.
It should have been a movie about Yelena first.
Exactly.
You know what would have been great?
Natasha second.
Yeah.
If it was a bluff, and like when the Black Widow movie's released, Black Widow's dead. It's about Yelena.
I would have much preferred that.
You know what I mean? Like, she's the new Black Widow. It's like, what happened to Scarlett Johansson? Let's find out.
Yeah, I think this movie would have been much better as a Disney Plus TV show.
Yeah.
And it could have been like a combination of the origin story of Black Widow, origin story of Yelena, and then sort of transitioning into Yelena becoming the new Black Widow. Alternatively, you could make this movie, I think, I said to you, one interesting thing would do is the first half sets up who Yelena is and Black Widow, her relationship with Black Widow, and then the second half flashes forward after Endgame, and it's about like Yelena after that.
Yeah.
And so she becomes Black Widow in the movie.
Yeah.
I think Yelena in the comic books becomes White Widow at one point, so they can have both Black Widow and White Widow. And they can always bring ScarJo back. I mean, it's comics.
Yeah. Multiverse ScarJo.
I'm pretty sure Black Widow in the comics is actually a clone because she died and now she's like... So
they could be a
Skrull. That. Yeah. Please don't. But you see, like, they could have literally done anything. And what they should have done is, one, made this movie years and years ago.
Yeah.
But two, if you've killed off your character and you need to introduce the new character taking up the mantle... I mean, they made a whole season of a show to show you how Falcon became Captain America.
That's right. I almost want to say it's a sexist approach to Black Widow to not give her a show when it's almost perfect for TV.
But again, this goes back to what James said. The decision to make this a movie was probably made years ago.
That's true.
And they were long in the idea of making it a movie.
People have been asking for it, and then they've killed her off, and they're finally finally we're going to do it. And it's like too little, too late.
I think if they were presented with the opportunity today, it probably would be a TV show. It would be. I think if they were making the decision now, I think it would be a TV show.
If they didn't know about the whole COVID, obviously no one knew about COVID. But it's like, they
and it would have been much better for it.
Yeah.
But I still maintain this could have been a movie and worked well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, getting onto the movie itself.
Yeah, let's talk about the movie.
There's so much fat in the script. unbelievable amounts of fat. I think James was saying when we watched it, there's thing like basically five things happen in the course of the whole movie.
90 minutes into the movie. The movie's about 2 hours 10 minutes roughly. 90 minutes into the movie. So the running time of a full movie pretty much. I was like, nothing has happened.
I think James said a better director could fit all of the pretty much everything, most of what happens in this film into like 45 minutes.
But that's the thing. I was like, it's the script that's the problem.
Yeah.
On like, you need a
So like straight off the bat, you see a couple of actiony things, but then like the movie really kind of gets rolling when ScarJo is like living in a caravan.
Yeah. So there's the opening scene.
It finally introduces the villain.
Yeah. I know we're going back and forth, but this movie's so bad, and I have so much to say, and we don't have a lot of time. There's the opening scene where the kids in the 90s. So she's shipped back to Russia because they found out. Yep. She goes back to the Red Room, the assassin school. She gets trained there, but we don't see any of that. We do a weird title sequence, flash forward to just after Civil War. She's on the run from the authorities because she helped Captain America escape in Civil War. So she's hiding out in Norway, I think, in a caravan. And like quite a lot of time goes past, nothing happens. It's quite boring. Then what happens?
She gets attacked by Taskmaster.
Yeah.
Oh no! Before that, we see Yelena.
Yeah. There's the introduction to the briefcase with the
Yelena's being mind controlled by the Black Widow.
In possibly one of the better sequences of the movie.
Which bit?
The bit with Yelena at the start
when
Scarlett's in Morocco.
It was alright.
Yeah.
But anyway, she's Yelena's still a Black Widow. She's being mind controlled to be a mindless assassin. There's a scientist lady or an ex-Black Widow who got out and developed an antidote to the mind control.
Powder goes
Yelena kills her, but the lady sprays the red gas in her face, and now she's not mind controlled anymore. So she sends the antidote to Black Widow, who's just hiding out, chilling, and then Taskmaster comes and tries to get her. Now we have to talk about Taskmaster. Oh my god, I'm sorry, everyone. Okay. My mind is going a mile a minute. We have to reset the show. Like, let's.
No. Let me. It's like we'll just. It's fine.
You take over. Honestly, I don't know what
Taskmaster. So Taskmaster in the comics is a villain who essentially. They're not supernatural, but when you get to comics, certain people are so good at abilities, they might as well be supernatural. Yeah. Taskmaster is one of those characters who has no innate abilities of a magical source, but his thing
is technically not a mutant, is he?
No. Huh. Their thing is that I don't think he is. They can match anyone's fighting abilities just by observing them.
Yeah.
So you're basically like, it's like mirror abilities. Yeah. So you can watch a video of anyone fighting and he can duplicate that exactly.
He can't copy Captain America's super strength, but he can copy Captain America's fighting style. He can learn the shield technique just by watching Captain America.
Yeah, exactly.
So he's very hard to fight.
Yeah, because it's like fighting a mirror. You can't hide anything from him in terms of your
any
abilities.
move you come up with, he's going to be able to...
He can counter it. Yeah, because they also know the repertoire of like every other MCU character too, so there's always a perfect rebuttal.
And in the comics, he's like one of the best mercenaries.
Yeah.
And like pretty much every evil organization in the Marvel comics has hired him to train their men or to kill someone for them. Because he is so good.
So Taskmaster doesn't have superpowers per se, but his abilities come from having injected himself with SS something German.
Didn't he inject that himself after he already had the ability though? He injected it after to enhance the ability.
So
anyway, we're getting
regardless. My point is, it's not magic.
In the comics, it's a little more complicated.
But
he
anyway,
doesn't have superpowers.
He's an interesting character because he's got a cool skull mask and he can copy.
Yeah, and he's got the cool shield and he's just cool.
And he's a mercenary, like
so
going around the world.
Full spoilers, right? Full spoilers because I'm gonna drop something hilarious. Yeah. We're watching the movie. Taskmaster's been introduced, I think, at this point.
He's introduced when he she's in Norway. She's got the package that
Yeah.
has the red antidote in it.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, something off screen explodes her car.
Yeah.
We were laughing like, "What the hell was that?" I think it was a rocket. But
It looks
looked like the Flash.
Yeah, it's
It
hilarious.
was so quick and bizarre. And then she's fighting Taskmaster,
Yeah.
and the CGI in this movie is rough.
It's real bad.
It's
yeah.
pretty
Oof.
bad. Yeah. It's rubbery. It's video
Yeah.
gamey.
And she's fighting Taskmaster, and he does some copier moves, and then we don't see him again for most of the movie.
Yeah.
He comes back in the middle.
Now it's funny because we start watching one of the earlier sequences shows a decision that Scarlet Witch struggles with internally.
Scarlet Witch?
Black Widow.
Black Widow.
Black Witch. I'm sorry.
Spider.
Yeah. So I'm getting my MCU characters mixed up. Yeah. Anyway, one of the core problems that Natasha faces in this film is kind of like her grip of killing an innocent person.
Yeah.
And so when you see the innocent person die on screen, James goes, that's going to be Taskmaster.
Yeah.
Marvel would never let Black Widow kill a child on screen.
In Avengers, Black Widow says she's got red on her ledger, which you don't know what that means, but she says
You assume
she
she's
says
killed people.
she's killed a lot of people. She's done terrible things. And Loki says to her, like Dracov's daughter, and he mentions other things that she did. And you don't know what that is, but it's bad. She's got blood on her hands.
Yeah.
And her defection to S.H.I.E.L.D., which you don't see in the movies, happens a few years before Iron Man 2. She's trying to make things right by being a hero. Now, this movie takes place after the Avengers, but references the fact that she killed a little girl when trying to kill the general guy.
Yeah.
Drakov, I think his name is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just said that, didn't I? Anyway, she's gonna kill the general guy who's like the head of the Red Room, who was like the
only way
spearhead of this assassin.
Only way to safely assassinate this
Yeah.
general would be to use the daughter as a means
bait,
of getting close to
Yeah.
the general.
And as soon as that happened, I was like, "There's no way Disney's gonna let one of their heroes
An
kill
Avenger,
a little
no
girl
less, yeah.
on screen."
Yeah.
And I was like, "I bet you she's Taskmaster because he's wearing a mask and he doesn't say anything the whole movie." And at the end of the movie, lo and behold, takes off and he's like, "It's actually she's got like a little burn scar."
Yeah.
And it's like actually it's his
The daughter.
daughter.
And she's weirdly aged up.
And the timeline doesn't make sense.
Because the daughter should be
and
like,
the
what,
powers-
15 or
At
something?
the most, probably not.
And
even.
the real
And-
slap in the face is that the powers aren't even like some cool learning technique that
And
they give her. She has like a microchip.
She's just like a cyborg. Like they just plugged a chip in her head, and I was just like, "What?
Why?
What?" And I'm like, also, again, prequel problems. In the other Marvel movies, they talk about Budapest. What happened in Budapest? She got red on her ledger. Oh, she did bad things. They finally show what happened in Budapest, and she just killed a little girl, which is terrible. But it's like
you're
set
dropping
things-
breadcrumbs, and then that's the amount. That's what it amounts to.
In Avengers, when they're fighting the aliens in New York, and Black Widow says to Hawkeye, "Just like Budapest, right?" And he's like, "You and I remember Budapest differently." This movie shows that she just killed a little girl in Budapest. Prequels, don't do them.
Look, also, keep in mind, you don't have to. You can have Taskmaster and have the little girl not die at the same time.
Yeah. Also, but that's the thing is, why have why have
Lazy
Taskmaster in this
filmmaking.
movie at all?
Yeah.
He's in that scene where he attacks her car and then he runs away, or no, he kicks her off the bridge.
Yeah.
Which we laughed at. Then she goes to Budapest, which is where the package came from, which is where Yelena is hiding in the safe house. Then there's a car chase where Taskmaster uses Hawkeye's bow ability to attack them.
And
then you don't see her
casting is rough.
again.
Yeah.
There.
I remember saying to James and Callum watching this car scene that's filled with CG, if Pierce Brosnan can drive a tank down the street
In GoldenEye, yeah.
in GoldenEye for the budget will be much less than they probably spent on this movie.
Yeah. I mean, and they got paid a lot by BMW to show all those
well,
cars.
he
I'm
was
sure
saying, he
it
was
is.
saying during the actual chase scene, you're like, this could be a car commercial because
Yeah.
it looks so clean.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so clean.
And every 10 seconds, Alan, there's like an in shot of like the new BMW
badge,
cars.
yeah.
Like
We joked,
presented by CarPlay.
we joked that Scarlett Johansson was also saying, "Good thing we have these warm
Good
seats."
thing we have lane assist to keep us
Yeah.
on the road.
I am surprised when the
leaning
car
out the
flipped,
window
the
shooting.
airbags didn't go off.
Yeah.
I was like, oh.
It's a good thing we're in a Beamer.
Yeah.
Good structural integrity.
But then you
the-
don't see Taskmaster again till the end of the movie
Yeah.
where it's revealed who it actually is. So one, you've wasted Taskmaster as a character, and two, you've wasted Taskmaster, your crappy version of Taskmaster, in your movie. So you've ruined the comic book version by not using what makes him Taskmaster, what makes him interesting, by turning him into a boring
cyborg person.
Terminator.
Yeah. Also,
So-
they don't say anything either. It's like this,
No.
like brooding. That's the
They're
whole
just
personality. It's
standing.
just brooding.
The whole thing is Taskmaster is threatening.
Yeah.
It's like Taskmaster is better
It's-
left
they just-
unexplored almost. Dude, we didn't
Kinda.
need to have the reveal.
No, but Taskmaster in the comics and
He's a-
Taskmaster as he should be in the movie
Yeah. He's very
Is-
commanding.
is an expert mercenary
Yeah.
assassin who mirrors abilities, talks a bit of smack,
Yeah.
does it,
It's like-
commands respect.
Exactly. If you've played the
What we
Avengers game, the Taskmaster you see in the Avengers game is the Taskmaster from the comics.
What we get in the movie is it could have been any character. It could have it literally could have been any henchman. Like
That's
it was
right.
just a muscle guy. Like you didn't even need to be there. And the main villain played by Ray Winstone, who's I
Whose
don't know
accent is
what
terrible.
accent he was trying to do, but
He was
wasn't
it was like a
Russian.
Cockney guy trying to do a Russian accent. It didn't
That's-
work.
like
That's
Jackson,
exactly
he ends up
what's
sounding like a
happened.
New Yorker.
But he ends up sounding like a New Yorker. It's bizarre. But
Like,
he's
I'm walking here.
he's off screen for 99% of the movie as well.
Yeah.
So you don't have a good villain in this movie.
Yeah. Well, one of the big sequences that they even use in the trailer is a prison break, and that goes for entirely too long.
Yeah.
like 15 minutes too long. almost.
Some interesting CG use.
So they escape Taskmaster in Budapest after the car chase,
yeah.
and then they're like, we have
to rescue Red Guardian.
for some, I can't remember why.
'Cause he
There's
knows-
just-
he knows how to
where
get to the
red-
Red
he knows how
Room.
to locate
he
the
knows
red
to get to
room,
the
yeah.
Red Room because the Red Room, which
It's always moving.
Black Widow destroyed and killed the general,
And he was
and then
friends.
it was like actually he's not dead, and actually the Red Room is still around, but they don't know where it is. So it's like we have to
Yeah.
get the Red Guardian, who knows where the Red Room is, who's actually her adopted
Father,
father, quote
played by
unquote.
David Harbour. Yeah.
I liked the whole character of Red Guardian.
Look,
As that sort of
we all love David Harbour here, and I think that's the only reason we like Red Guardian. As a character, he shouldn't be in the movie.
No,
no,
that's right.
Like, again,
And
he's not right for the
as-
movie, but I did chuckle at the whole.
He's fun, yeah.
USSR sort of like post-Soviet,
Yeah,
like
but
he's the
it's
hero
a-
he was.
This isn't a
like,
Cold War movie, though.
No,
That's
it's
the thing.
not.
It doesn't.
It's weird.
None of the timelines make any sense in this, and that would be the least of its problems if it were good. Like but the other problems are so bad.
After they've rescued Red Guardian, there's one comment which I got a lot of smack from people on the internet, which I read an IGN article about. Sort of turns it around a little bit. That says like Red Guardian's going on. You don't know how much of what he says is truth or not, right?
Yeah.
And he says about how he was fighting with Captain America and all this other stuff. Everyone's like,
Yeah.
yeah, whatever, Dad.
Yeah.
Like whatever. But I'm like, but at the end of in Endgame or Infinity War or whatever it is,
Endgame,
when Steve goes back in time to deliver all the gemstones back, right? Conceivably, he's an old man at the end of the movie handing the shield over.
Yeah.
There's a possibility that somewhere in the 80s, during Steve's time travel business, he was fighting Red Guardian.
that would
That takes
that opens up another can
Yeah.
of worms. Where are you telling me Steve was in costume running around?
Yeah, or like here's
Or
the
that-
problem.
He had the shield. That's
Yeah.
all Red Guardian would probably need
Yeah,
to
look,
see.
but-
here's the problem with that though. You can't make things so complicated for the audience. You can't say
No, I don't.
I'm saying it's a
I don't say-
possibility. It's interesting.
I think this is the problem with Red Guardian being in this movie. If you don't have Captain America, there's no point in having Red Guardian
That's
because
right.
Red Guardian is the Soviet answer to Captain America. He's he's the Russian Captain America. Captain America was on ice for 70
That's right.
years, was awakened just before the first Avengers movie, had been active for 10 or so years, plus 5 because of the time jump in Endgame, and then went back in time and retired as an old man.
What could have made more sense, though?
Red Guardian, being an old school 80s Soviet creation, sure, they could have created him and being like, yeah, he's an answer to Captain America, but Steve has not been around for that entire time.
But they could have
his existence in this movie
Yeah,
doesn't
it's
make sense.
problematic,
Him saying, I fought Captain America in the 80s, and people being like, no, you didn't, he was in ice, and there never really being a resolution to that. Yeah, you can do all sorts of mental gymnastics and comic book explanations, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't.
Because he shouldn't have been in the film.
No, but they could have changed, just speaking about what the movie we got, like they could have changed that line. Instead of saying name dropping Captain America, could have had the same interaction by being like, does the Winter Soldier talk about me? Does Bucky talk about me?
Yeah, but that's the thing, like, that's another thing with this movie.
But that's not what we got.
The quote-unquote comedy in this movie always falls flat, except for a couple of David Harbour bits. And I kept expecting him to bring up Captain America and then finally admit that he was lying because he's a failure, and that they gave him the super soldier serum, and then he didn't pan out as a super soldier, and that's why he was sent on the mission to America to raise the kids there and be a normal family guy. And then that's why he was in the prison, because he was just... we never get that moment.
No.
And so it brings up another question of like, well, why does he keep mentioning it? Like, again, like he shouldn't exist if Captain America is not an active part of the universe anymore. If they did want to introduce him, they should have introduced him now as a young man, a Russian Hydra agent, whatever, who gets injected with the super soldier serum, which we've seen in the Winter Soldier Falcon TV show, being a thing now.
Winter Soldier has broken free. They need another Winter Soldier, which they'll call Red Guardian.
Yeah, Winter Soldier. Bucky has now acclimatized to his normal personality. What's his name? John Walker has become Captain America, and then Falcon takes over from Captain America. And so Hydra and or the Russian government or whatever is like, we got to get some of this super soldier serum. We got to get in on this. We got to get our guy. And then they create Red Guardian. This movie, if they really needed to, should have introduced Red Guardian as a new character.
Could have been the villain. He could have been the villain of the movie.
Much more interesting.
Yeah.
He could have been a contemporary at the male version of the Red Room.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Who knew Natasha when she was younger, who comes back as the villain. You get rid of Taskmaster, you get Red Guardian, he's got a shield and everything because they're modeling him after Captain America, and they're like, but we've got Captain America now, he's Captain Russia, he's the Red Guardian. Really, this movie is so bad, anything you do would have been better.
I was thinking about this before the show, and I'm like, I'm kind of wondering if the script that they shot was like a backup script, because the issue I have is Red Sparrow came out in 2018. This movie only got greenlit like late 2017. Like they actually everything only started coming together.
Red Sparrow is a very derivative movie. That's
no,
not.
But my point is that explained the history of the school for the assassin ladies. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, I'm wondering if their original concept
they didn't want to.
Yeah, if their original concept was uncomfortably similar to Red Sparrow, and so they had to quickly, we start shooting soon, let's just come up with another script. And some guy was like, here, I got something.
I don't think so, but it's an interesting theory.
Yeah, because I was looking up the dates, and I'm like, I wonder if Red Sparrow threw a spanner in the works.
Maybe. I still would have rather have seen the origin story of Black Widow in the Red Room.
Yeah,
like,
me too. Because that's the obvious character fleshing out choice. Yeah. So why didn't they film it? That's why I have that theory. Like maybe they were going to, but then Red Sparrow, of course, beat them to it because that was the Black Widow alternative of 2018. It's like, well, here's something similar for you.
It's just a lot of bad choices.
We'll talk about more bad choices after this quick break. You are back on the Tuesday Review, talking all things Black Widow and MCU. So as we were saying, this is a terrible movie. A lot of bad choices were made.
So apologies to listeners. I've been going a mile a
Yeah.
minute. I've just got so much to say, and I'm really mad. And this movie was very, very disappointing as a fan of Black Widow and as a fan of the MCU. We're gonna take a breath and reset.
Yeah.
So we were sort of up to the prison break scene, where they go to break Red Guardian, David Harbour's character, out of a Russian gulag in the snow. And I feel like one of the only reasons they did this was so Black Widow and Yelena could wear the white suit, which is from the comic books. Now, the prison is in the snow, but they're in a helicopter for the whole rescue, and so they don't need to wear white suits. But anyway, it's a dumb movie. Who cares? They rescue David Harbour. He has super strength.
Yeah.
And so I question as to how he couldn't have broken out of this normal, regular prison before.
Also, dilapidated prison too. It's not like it's like a high
just like a
security.
run down.
It's not even a high security prison.
I think the answer is just hypothermia.
The only
basically.
theory is that because they're in the middle of Siberia or whatever, that he would have nowhere to go. But clearly, if someone got there, they would have to use a vehicle. So he could have stolen the vehicle. Anyway, stupid movie, whatever. That's not the problem. The problem is they're breaking him out. He finally gets his strength up and punches his way out. And Yelena's piloting the helicopter and they, rope ladder and whatever, trying to get him out. And then Black Widow jumps down and is like fighting the guards. And then, I can't remember why, but an avalanche starts on a nearby mountain and there's all this CGI snow rolling down and the prison starts exploding and there's stuff flying everywhere and the helicopter's going out of control and Red Guardian's jumping up trying to get to the higher ground so he can get to the helicopter. And it goes on forever.
Yeah. It really uncomfortably long.
And the CGI is terrible and everything was just too much.
Yeah.
And I said to you guys, this scene should have been really short. They break him out, he jumps on the helicopter and he's like, so long, suckers.
Except it's like one of the big action scenes of the whole film.
And I was just like, why are we supposed to care about any of this? There's no villain involved. There's no stakes involved.
David Harbour's barely been established as a character in the film at this point.
So why is this one of their major action set pieces? It just went on forever. Anyway, they finally get on the helicopter and they land and they're going to see their quote unquote fake mother or whatever, Melina, and they get to a farm somewhere in Russia or whatever, and she's hiding out there, and the mother is working on the mind control stuff, like using it on pigs, testing it, and then they argue around the table. At this point, it's like 90 or so minutes, and I'm like, this should have been the start of the movie. Like, come on. And in the comics, Melina is a contemporary of Black Widow. She was a part of the Red Room assassin school. Black Widow defected to S.H.I.E.L.D. and overshadowed Melina, and Melina went off and became her own super assassin gun for hire called Iron Maiden, and Iron Maiden has armor that goes on her body, not like Iron Man, but like skin tight armor, like it's cool. In this movie, she's just an older agent who I guess was trained in the Red Room at some time in the past, but like David Harbour being the Red Guardian, was relegated to this fake American family mission. And then years later is just hiding out on a farm doing science experiments. They, again, making an interesting, cool comic book character boring.
Yeah.
And not doing it for the benefit of your movie. If it was for the benefit of your movie, fine. But it's not. Because she almost kills a pig. So I'm like, oh, they're setting her up as Iron Maiden. They're setting her up as a villain. No. After that, she says, I'm sorry what I did.
She just really doesn't like those pigs.
Yeah, it's just like, I'm friends now, and we're going to find a way to find Draco.
And they sort of, they joke it off being like, oh, no, it's fun. He could have taken another 11 seconds.
Yeah.
Ha, ha, ha.
And she's
like,
a psychopath.
But you're still torturing this poor animal.
She's a psychopath, and I was like, when is the reveal going to be that she's actually working for the villain the whole time? It never comes, because this movie, like Fast and Furious is about family.
Well, they kind of
unlike Fast and Furious,
they do this. They do
it's
this.
not fun.
They have this faint thing where they're like, actually, she might be a villain because she calls the Red Room to
Yeah.
come and kidnap them. But then they're like, actually, she's a good guy all along. We nearly fooled you, didn't
Yeah.
we?
It's like,
And you're like,
huh?
what?
Oh, but she doesn't have the Iron. She's
It's
not
more
Iron
interesting.
Maiden.
It'd be more interesting for her to be a villain, and
Yeah.
her and David Harbour have to have a fight. Like
What?
her and Red
Okay.
Guardian have to have a fight.
Okay,
That's more interesting.
Interesting, right? You know how we said Red Guardian should have been a new villain introduced in this movie, and a contemporary to Black Widow. Same with Iron Maiden. Iron Maiden and Red Guardian could be like an assassin, whether they're friendly rivals or lovers or whatever. You got Iron Maiden, the female villain. You got Red Guardian, the
That's a cool
male
idea.
villain.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, you've got Black Widow and Yelena, and they have to fight against. So you've got the still Russian agents, Red Guardian and Iron Maiden, who are going after the ex-agents, the heroes now, Black Widow and Yelena. And Yelena, like I said, becomes White Widow, which they might be trying to set up in later movies. But like I said, they need to do more work on that.
Yeah.
This movie doesn't do enough work on Yelena. So anyway, they go to the farm. Yeah, she's, and then Rachel Weisz is like, Milena's like, oh, sorry, I called the bad guys from the Red Room. They're coming to get you. So they come, they take them to the Red Room, which the reason they couldn't find it was because it's a sky platform. It's like
it's
a
always
space
moving.
station.
How
thing in the
original.
sky. Yeah, I was like, oh. This movie,
Which also would be very
Also-
obvious in like
No one's picking
but
it up on radar.
It's
Yeah, no one's
MCU,
picking it
it's
up on
MCU,
radar.
So they've got stealth, whatever. Who cares?
yeah, but still,
the problem
it's massive.
Is, one, it looks boring.
Yeah, it's typical.
Two,
Yeah.
this movie also is very close to the movie The Winter Soldier, to the point where it's kind of a problem. Like there's too many similarities. So anyway, they get to this sky platform. They infiltrate it. Milena's actually like, I'm actually a good guy. And Scarlett Johansson's like, finally, General Dreykov, I'm here to kill you. And he's like, you can't kill me because I stink.
Yeah,
he
He
has a special
literally
pheromones,
has an
yeah.
experimental
Pheromone
pheromone that if people around him
And
smell
it's
it, they
like-
can't
and
cause
then
violence against him.
You're like, she's gonna break her nose.
Yeah, and I'm like, I called her. I'm like, she's gonna break her nose so that she
Can
can't
defeat
smell
him,
it and
yeah.
can defeat it. And it's so dumb, and they actually did it. And I'm like, this movie sucks. It's so dumb, but like so unself-aware and self-serious that it's not fun at all. And the action is so bad, and there's so much CGI crap. This
Yeah.
happens every time we watch an action movie. Is it 2021? Is it 2005?
Yeah.
By CGI, you can't tell.
Yeah.
It's
The car scene we mentioned before, it looked like it was out of a PS3 game.
Yeah.
Not even PS4.
And the
Like-
end of this movie gets so crazy where they're blowing up the
Yeah.
spaceship and they're trying to use the red antidote on the other Black Widows who are there.
Yeah,
who
because
are
the whole
mind
point, of
controlled.
course, is to rescue the other Black Widows and
Yeah.
free them
Set
from mind
them
control.
free, yeah. And so there's like, and there's also weird slow-mo
Yeah.
during the action scenes, which doesn't work. And the end goes so crazy. They're like flying through the air and there's like CGI debris going everywhere. And I was just like, this is too much. I don't care about any of this. And it looks like crap.
And one of the big character climaxes is Yelena tries to sacrifice herself.
Oh, that was hilarious.
And she gets like burned by the engines, but there's like barely a singe on
Yeah,
her, and
she-
she's fine.
she like throws her stuff into the turbine so it
Yeah, and
blows
then
up
explode-
the enemy, the Dreykov's
Yeah, not
thing.
the engines. Yeah.
And Tasha's
And-
like, no.
Yeah, it's like, no, it's supposed to be this sacrificial scene, emotional scene. I was just like, this is so dumb. I'm like, you've just introduced her character to take on the mantle of Black Widow. You're not going to kill her off. Don't pretend.
Yeah.
And she blows up and she's flying through
And
the
she's
sky.
fine.
Not a scratch.
Yeah, makeup's still on fine. Yeah.
And I was just like, are they even trying? I know these are superheroes who don't have the same
Weakness,
flaws
yeah.
as normal people, but I'm like, this is too much.
Yeah.
And it's so plasticky and rubbery and flubbery and fake. Anyway, yeah, like I said, everything blows up. And then the family's back together, Yelena and Natasha and Red Guardian and Melina, and they're all like, yay, family. And we've all got the Black Widows, the other widows who are not mind controlled anymore
Yeah.
and not turned into mindless assassin. It's like, yay, hug. And Natasha's like, peace out, everybody. I got to be in Infinity War. I can't come with you. And she walks off to be apprehended by the authorities. But it cuts to black before we see what happened. I'm like, did she just run away from them?
Yeah.
I have a feeling there was a deleted scene with Thunderbolt Ross.
She Batman caped away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's so weird that she didn't at least go with them for a while until hooking up with Steve and the others before Infinity War. And like I said, her finding Steve and before Infinity War is a much more interesting story. I would have rather that. But like I said, it's a prequel, not necessary. We don't need to see when she dyed her hair blonde. Who cares?
I mean, because we get the really lame after credit scene. Yeah, really lame.
So the end credits scene flashes forward till after Endgame.
Yeah.
And Melina goes to Natasha's grave, which I was scratching
someplace.
Scratching. It's under a tree somewhere.
Someplace
in rural looking. I assume it's Ohio, but I'm like, did we miss something?
Yeah, no.
No.
And I was just like, is this important? I want to know where this is. Anyway, she's crying because Natasha's dead. And then Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who played
Madam Hydra.
Contessa Valentina, whatever. We saw her in Winter Soldier and Falcon and Winter Soldier. She comes up and she like takes out her phone, and we find out that Yelena has been working for
Hydra, basically.
And we don't know, that wasn't shown,
No.
which we'll learn in another show later on. And she takes out her phone. She's like, "You want to know who really killed Natasha?"
Yeah.
And it's got a picture of Hawkeye.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, come on! They're really grasping at straws here. They don't know what they're doing."
That's going to be an interesting encounter because he's going to be like, "What was I supposed to do? Let the whole universe die?"
Yeah, it's like I tried to sacrifice myself by shooting bows at her so she wouldn't sacrifice herself, but she jumped first. End of conversation. It's so dumb. And especially because the rest of the movie was so bad. Yeah. This end credit scene was...
They have a real bad taste in the mouth.
Yeah, especially embarrassing. Should we go off air now? Because I have like 100 more things.
We'll take it off air now.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the Tuesday review. This is our review of Black Widow. We've just gone off air from the podcast.
From the live
portion of the show, so we can say off air comfortably, this movie fucking sucks.
It's fucking shit. Okay, so apologies for that live section, but I was freaking out about not having enough time. And there was so much stuff to talk about, and there still is a lot to talk about. And so I'm just going to go through my notes top to bottom, and you guys stop me whenever you want. And we've already sort of explained most things, but we did so fast that I don't know if it made any sense to the listeners. Hopefully it did. But anyway, first thing... so one of the problems with Captain Marvel was that they shoehorned it in between Infinity War and Endgame. That was a movie that either should have came out years before, or they should have waited until after Endgame and then introduced Captain Marvel, and then that would explain her absence and other things.
Yeah.
Instead, they rushed it into production, which I think is one of the reasons why the movie's not very good. And they also made it a prequel to explain where she came from. And that did things that, which is one of the reasons I really don't like it, is because it did things to the timeline and to the characters that have ripple effects throughout the whole MCU.
Yeah.
And so they turned S.H.I.E.L.D. into just some government agency who are just a bunch of pencil pushers.
Yep.
And Nick Fury, who's supposed to be this badass warrior, super secret agent, was just a guy sitting at a desk.
Especially when you look at the comic book version, and he was like a Vietnam kind of super soldier kind of guy.
He was World War II soldier.
Yeah,
That's how he lost his eye. He was given a variation of the super soldier serum, which he's been living for that long.
Yeah, and like he has this cool backstory, and then he's just like some dude in Captain Marvel.
And they did the whole thing where the cat is the one who got rid of his eye, and I was just like, you ruined it, and they ruined the scrolls.
Yeah, I mean,
and-
not to mention, I mean, Marvel, they took one of the coolest characters, which could have been set up as, if you wanted to have him as a villain, that's fine. But he's like cosmic stuff. Like, so they could have saved him for like a Guardians movie or further down the line.
Yeah, my point is like, this is what Black Widow does.
Yeah.
Is it's they rushed it into production because they killed her off, and they're like, we need to just get
we've got to
this movie out of
capitalize
the
on
way.
ScarJo while we can.
Yeah. And we're shoehorning it into a weird period in time where we didn't see Black Widow between Civil War and Infinity War. Instead of doing something meaningful in that period, we're just going to show you right after Civil War what happens to introduce the family, quote unquote, so that in 20 movies from now, we can have them come back.
Yeah.
And this is a problem with all Marvel movies, but it's starting to become more and more of a problem. And Black Widow is highlights why this is a problem. Is the movies, the franchise mentality? Like, every movie can't just be a good movie; it has to be part of a larger franchise. The movies as content, whereas it's not a movie. This Black Widow.
It's the next installation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just another... You basically pay a subscription to the MCU by seeing these movies, and each one is just another
Entry,
update sort of thing. And this is coming from someone who really likes the MCU.
Yeah.
But this is a problem, especially for a singular movie. And Black Widow also highlights, I think, a big problem with a lot of movies, but MCU in particular. Filmmaking by committee.
Yeah.
This movie definitely feels like too many cooks.
Oh, the script's all over the place.
It's
I
all
can't
over
see.
the place.
I can't see any other way that if one person or two people, like a team, came up with this script and like, this is the best we can do.
Yeah,
there needs to be more revisions.
I'm starting to think Kevin Feige
might not know.
Doesn't know what he's doing. I think maybe he did know up until up until Endgame, and now he's kind of trying to figure things out. I think also a problem with this interconnected universe and this whole franchise mentality and whatever is, one, everything you do affects everything else.
Yeah.
So you're afraid to do anything, and when you do something, it might not be for the benefit of the movie. It might be for the benefit of a movie that might not ever be made.
Yeah. I feel like we've been complaining about scripts a lot lately.
Because they're all bad.
Yeah, I hope we're not entering a new period in blockbusters where the script is not as important as
we're
knuckles deep into that.
Yeah,
you know what I mean, though, right? I mean, we saw it in Mortal Kombat. We love like who wrote this. It's like an AI is writing all these scripts.
The last 10 plus years, it's like that's all we've been getting. Is this
you know
like,
the scene in The Simpsons with the monkeys at the typewriters?
Yeah,
it's almost like that.
Yeah.
Except they got to Shakespeare.
Yeah, eventually. It's a thing of, if you put a million monkeys in typewriters, eventually you'll get something good.
It was the best of times. It was the blurst of times.
The blurst of
times.
times.
You idiot.
Yeah.
I would trust those monkeys more than whoever's making these movies. Cause
that sounds harsh, but you have to... The movie, regardless of what other critics might be saying, the story is terrible.
It's poorly written, and also it ties into what we talk about a lot with these movies, and which we mentioned before, is while Kevin Feige might be very passionate and knowledgeable about comic books, the people writing and directing the individual movies probably never read a comic book in their life.
Yeah.
They're screenwriters who make their living as screenwriters, and
paycheck's a paycheck.
You have to be a good screenwriter to write a movie. You don't have to be a comic book nerd or a fan of comic books.
That's right.
But to make an MCU movie, I think you have to at least be a bit of both.
Yeah, because it's when you're entering something so specific,
Yeah.
That you need to have a not encyclopedic knowledge, but you need to know who the characters are. You need to know your way around their backstories.
You need to at least
know where they should be going.
You need to at least have the respect of the franchise.
Exactly.
And the you're making the next movie in a series of films that's 20 whatever for movie state.
Yeah. And it's highly esteemed. It's one of like, the key franchises in modern cinema.
It's more like, you know, I'm sure these, as James said, like these are just screenwriters hired to help work on these projects. But it's like you're working on a sequel to 20 movies. You need to have some...
It's a hard job for anyone.
But at the same time, no. But at the same time, you need to have that level of respect for it. You need to take it that seriously.
And like they might be... The people who wrote this movie might be massive Black Widow fans. They might be massive comic book nerds. But it doesn't show. No. And that comes back to the filmmaking by committee, the too many cooks, and the fact that anything you do in this movie is going to have ripple effects. The ripple effects it does have... cause problems because it's a prequel and they're doing silly things. The ripple effects we haven't yet seen are why this movie is made the way it is and why MCU movies are made the way they are, because they're playing it too safe. They don't want to mention certain things or bring in certain comic book characters because what if 10 years from now Keanu Reeves wants to play that character, so we can't introduce him now.
You know,
and so the movie's worse for it.
When Captain Marvel came out and, you know, we were talking about how much it sucked, as far as I'm aware, that was like the main MCU movie that sucked. It didn't really get bad until Captain Marvel. Kinda.
Like the first couple of Thor movies were pretty rough, but they weren't terrible.
Yeah, but I feel like this movie is starting to signify to me that maybe we're starting to get maybe the MCU is starting to become uninspired.
It's so far
like
from
complacent.
It's so far from where it started. I think it's gotten out of Kevin Feige's hands.
Yeah,
and
that makes sense.
It's gotten out of its own hands, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
It can no longer contain itself.
It's buckling under the pressure of being the MCU.
My dad's been going back and watching the older Marvel movies in order and stuff. And the first Avengers movie is so simple in comparison to what's happening now.
Yeah.
And it's much better written, and it's the special effect. The CGI is not good, but there's less of it.
Is he watching the 3D Blu-ray on a 3D capable telly?
No, of course not.
Okay.
No one watches 3D anymore.
We when we got that on Blu-ray, we watched it on our 3D supported telly with the 3D glasses.
It was okay.
It was pretty good.
2012. Simpler times.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's like you think of where the MCU came from, and it's so humble beginnings.
Yeah.
And you see it now, and it's so it's too big. It's too big for its own boots.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's gotten away from everyone involved.
Yeah, it's they're getting into this mindset now where I'm kind of worried about the movies going forward, because what we're getting, the fact that this movie got greenlit and someone was like, excellent, worries me.
No, the fact that this version of the script was what they were okay with.
Someone in Disney was like, good script, let's film it. And then a director was like, let's shoot these scenes. This CG is acceptable.
Like I was saying with Captain Marvel, it's like they just need to get it out, because if they delay it longer or whatever, it's lost profits. Two, it's you have to beat the competition, and you have to
keep that money self-sustaining.
You have to keep relevant within your own timeline.
Yeah.
Which this movie hasn't been relevant for years, because this movie needed to come out 5 years ago.
This should have followed up Civil War, or like directly after release.
Or if this is what I was getting at when I started talking about Captain Marvel. Instead of shoehorning Captain Marvel in between Infinity War and Endgame, just so you could explain why Captain Marvel comes to punch Thanos once at the end of Endgame, you should have used that time. They knew they were going to kill off Black Widow in Endgame. So that's when you should have released your Black Widow movie.
Yeah.
And that Black Widow movie... See, this is the problem. There's too much. It needs to do too much.
Yeah.
It needs to fill out Black Widow's backstory. It needs to introduce a replacement Black Widow, someone to take up the mantle. and it needs to flesh out the character in the modern
Yeah.
time and potentially flesh out her relationship with Hawkeye
Yeah.
so that in Endgame we get the final emotional punch.
Yeah.
The
Look,
Black Widow movie we get flashes back to Civil War and just gives us a little story where it's like we're introducing her family
yeah.
so that maybe there can be a TV show later on with the Red Guardian and Yelena, and
Yeah.
it's like,
Look,
it's unnecessary.
Look, if I was the king of Disney, forgive me for mentioning Tom Cruise because he's something very close. He's very close to my heart at all times. You look at the I was talking to you when we watched the movie. What was like the last great espionage action movie that we
Yes.
can remember? And I'm not counting like John Wick or anything like that.
Yeah.
I'm talking about like your
Like
kind of
spy
like your,
movie.
yeah, a
Your-
spy movie.
Yeah.
And we were like probably Fallout, Mission Impossible Fallout.
Yeah.
I'm like the Black Widow movie should have been like a Mission
So-
Impossible film.
Yeah. So this actually ties into 2 points I have. One, the action in this movie is terrible. Like we mentioned, too much CGI crap. It goes too big when it should be more smaller and self-contained. There are a couple good stunts, like get people getting thrown into furniture and like flipping, and some good hand-to-hand combat. But otherwise, it's buried under a whole bunch of other CGI shaky
I
cam
remember I
crap.
said this when watching the movie. If Tom Cruise can fly a helicopter, why can't their characters
And that's
in
the
this movie?
thing. So, Black Widow is technically a street-level hero. She doesn't have super strength. She's more resilient than a normal person.
Yeah.
She's a very well-trained assassin to a point that in real life would be supernatural.
Yeah.
But in reality, she's not supernaturally powered or
Yeah.
or not science fiction powered,
Yeah.
She's not super powered.
Her main thing's gadgets, basically.
Sort of, yeah. And she's extremely well trained and disciplined.
Yeah.
So, but technically she's what we call a street level hero. Someone who couldn't go up against the Thanos by herself. Couldn't go up against a big galactic crazy
Threat. Yeah.
villain in the same way Thor or the Hulk or whatever could.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
So instead of making her movie with CGI stuff flying around and people falling out of the sky, they need to rein it in and make
Yeah.
it
Make
an
it sensible.
action espionage movie. She's also a super spy.
Yeah.
This
Exactly.
movie has no spy stuff.
Should have been an espionage movie.
Yeah. Like there's no point where they have to infiltrate somewhere. There's no heist scene. There's no Mission Impossible on the wires coming through the vents scene.
That's what I was hoping for.
We need that.
Yeah.
And-
like cool car chase. You can have a few cool car
Yeah.
chase scenes, some gun shooting scenes.
And like, the car chase in this, which we already said was embarrassing,
yeah.
versus the car chase in Fallout. Night and day.
Spectacular. Yeah.
I was thinking about this morning. The bathroom fight in Fallout with
Yeah,
Henry
yeah.
Cavill. So
Yeah.
brutal, so well done. They're
You can
smashing
feel
through.
the impact of it
Yeah.
all.
This movie has nothing even remotely close to that.
Yeah.
Now, Tom Cruise has a death wish. He's going to be doing these stunts and stuff. No one else is coming close to that. But that's why you have stuntmen and women.
Yeah. Exactly.
And ScarJo doesn't need to loop a helicopter.
Yeah.
You have stunt pilots for that.
Yeah.
Stunt pilots can wear a red wig and pretend to be Black Widow.
Look,
you have CGI
if
to
look at-
smush
look
her
at some-
face
look at some
onto
of
a
the-
stunt person.
Look at some of the stunt actors in Lord of the Rings. You can get away with all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. You can do
People don't
anything.
notice when you're
Do
watching
you
a movie.
think Roger Moore did any of his stunts?
No.
No. Daniel Craig might do a couple, but otherwise it's a stunt guy.
That's
You
it.
don't need to be Tom Cruise to get good stunts. This is why action movies suck now, because pretty much all of them are just CGI
Yeah.
crap. There's no effort taken into actual stunts and
it's-
practical action.
It's funny. A while ago, you might remember on the show during a roundtable, I talked about the movie Ronin,
Yeah.
and which is an espionage film in
Yeah.
a way. And I think I was talking to you before the show. One of the actors wanted to actually drive his car.
Yeah.
And the director said, "I better not see any brake lights.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to actually be doing this stunt,
Yeah.
you're going to do the stunt. Don't be safe because this
Exactly.
is a stuntman's job.
And if the actor wants to do it, they have to train
Yeah, you
a
can't.
lot to
yeah,
do
exactly.
it. And if they don't have time to train or whatever, you get the stunt driver to do
That's
it.
what they're there for.
That's how movies are made. No
Yeah.
one's gonna go online and go, ScarJo didn't do her own stunts. This movie sucks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
As long as we get the stunt and it's practical and it's real and has weight to it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how old action movies. That's why old action movies are awesome.
No one's suggesting that Vin Diesel's driving his car in the Fast and the Furious. No, you know what I mean. Those movies are the backbone of the stunt drivers.
Yeah, exactly.
Why can't we have stunt drivers in this movie?
Yeah, like this movie, like, and like I already mentioned, like the weird slow-mo and stuff. Like it's really poorly done. But like,
it should have been a Metal Gear Solid film.
We talked about GoldenEye at the start of this review.
Yeah.
Like, GoldenEye is, like, cream of the crop when it comes to not only action movies, but a James Bond movie. You've got espionage. You've got sneaky spy stuff. You got crawling through vents. You got big action scenes, stuff blowing up. You got car chases and vehicles.
The incredible climax.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Black Widow should have just been that.
Yeah.
Like,
would have been cheaper to film for a start.
Probably. Like, you don't need all this...
I know we've talked about this to death, but that always makes me laugh when it's like we see these movies and they don't look as good and they cost $200 million to make. And you got a $50 million movie from 20 years ago with practical...
Even with inflation, $50 million is not $300 million.
Well, there's a reason Christopher Nolan will blow up an actual jet. Because it's cheaper, cheaper and more effective than CGI.
It's because that's how movie magic... It makes like that.
Yeah.
This is why Christopher Nolan, even divisive as he is, this is why he's the only guy who I'm there day one.
Yeah.
Because he makes movies the way they're supposed to be made. When you see 100 or 1,000 people on screen, he gets those people. They don't make movies like that anymore.
Yeah.
They used to a lot.
Well,
now they don't.
From what we're hearing, they're trying to do that with the new Lord of the Rings show.
We'll see. I'm not holding my
There's
breath.
talking about like stunt actors and everything. There's stunt guys.
We talked about it when we reviewed Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings is so great.
Yeah.
Because it has the perfect balance of practical and CG.
Yeah.
It knows when it needs to use CG, and it knows that most of the time practical looks and works
allegedly,
better.
there's we'll say the working conditions and the stunts have been a bit rough on Lord of the Rings,
some
and
people got injured.
And the actors don't even know when they're going to go home.
Yeah,
because it's like, no, you're done when we finish.
They've just made Middle Earth and they're just filming it.
Let's film as much as we can now.
You're living in Middle Earth. We're filming it 24 hours a day. We're gonna cut this down eventually.
But it is, it's worrying to see that Marvel's taking this approach now. It's just overly reliant, and they've been that way for years. But this movie is It is an eyesore.
It's a testament to laziness.
It's the problem with a lot of movies that we talk about, but this one in particular could have been a more grounded, sort of quote unquote realistic.
As we said earlier in the review, it should have been a TV show because largely the TV shows have handled this better than the movies lately.
So two things. Remind me about the TV show in a minute. The other thing I wanted to say off of what Callum was saying with the spy stuff and what I was saying earlier with S.H.I.E.L.D. is I feel like the MCU has really bungled how they've handled S.H.I.E.L.D. as an organization. In the comic books, S.H.I.E.L.D. is... I don't know how to describe it to someone who's not familiar with it, but it's like super spies on crack.
Yeah, basically.
They all wear these ridiculous uniforms. They're all, they have gadgets come out the arse. The giant hovercraft you see in some of the MCU movies is just the helicarrier is just the tip of the iceberg.
It's like Men in Black meets like
MI6.
the US Air Force. Or something.
Sort of, yeah. It's like if every agent was James Bond and they all dressed like Black Widow and they all had crazy gadgets and they all had crazy secret lairs and all sorts of stuff. Now the MCU, for a while, they handled it fine, where it's like Nick Fury's mysterious. And you see some of the S.H.I.E.L.D. stuff. You see the helicarrier, so you're like, okay, S.H.I.E.L.D. is a thing. And then as it went on, and then S.H.I.E.L.D. got infiltrated by Hydra, and then I don't think S.H.I.E.L.D. exists, at least in its normal form anymore. And so they kind of got... and it's always in the background, which is fine, because it's not a S.H.I.E.L.D. movie. It's about the superheroes.
That's right, yeah.
And then, like I said, they introduced Captain Marvel, and they showed the flashback of... They neutered S.H.I.E.L.D. They nerfed it. Even though even in the canon of the MCU, like Howard Stark and Peggy Carter created S.H.I.E.L.D. for the express purpose of like supernatural and science fiction-y stuff.
Yeah.
So whatever was going in the 90s with Captain Marvel didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But I feel like Black Widow, the movie, highlights another problem with the ongoing franchise of the MCU is, like, we don't know who S.H.I.E.L.D. is.
They've lost their sense of identity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when we do see S.H.I.E.L.D., it's, like, very vague and in the background. And that's fine. Like I said, they're not the main focus. But I feel like something like Black Widow had the perfect opportunity to show, like, well, what is S.H.I.E.L.D.? You know?
Exactly. Maybe she was working for S.H.I.E.L.D. Maybe they told her the Red Room's active again. We need to send you in.
But that's the thing, right? So
and that's the espionage route. We need you to
thing,
infiltrate.
Yeah, the thing with Black Widow is she was working for the Russians or whatever, and then she defected to S.H.I.E.L.D. But that happens off screen a few years before the first Avengers movie. Now, this movie doesn't really explore that, but they do show Budapest, which is where the defection occurred, where she was able to kill Dreykov.
Yeah.
And Hawkeye helped her, and then she defected over to S.H.I.E.L.D. Why not make the movie about that?
Yeah.
And instead of her killing a little girl, make it a more fun spy movie where they're stuck in Budapest. There's Hydra agents trying to kill her. There's other Black Widows. There's other widows coming after her. You know, and it's like her and Hawkeye teaming up, like trying to...
Like a John Wick kind of, a John Wick 3 situation or whatever.
That way, when in Avengers, where she's like, just like Budapest, and he's like, you remember it differently, that way it makes sense.
Yeah.
And also you get to see, you know, the Dreykov. It's like, oh my God, there's just so many problems. To go off what Nathan was saying, the MCU now, they're not movies, you know, it's a franchise, it's movies as content. They're better off. It's basically the cinematic equivalent of a TV show. And I feel like their TV shows handle it a bit better because they're TV shows.
Yeah, they have more room.
But also they're more, we'll say, reasonably constrained in their use of sets and practical and stuff like that and scope. I don't know if this is true, and we'll probably talk about it next week. Apparently Loki is 90% practical sets. Obviously, there's CG effects like, you know, the monsters and the sort of all the sci-fi stuff. But the actual sets are apparently 90% practical.
Yeah.
Why can't this be 90% practical?
Yeah.
Because they went for that big science fiction movie approach.
But I feel like the movies themselves are basically just big episodes of a long-running TV show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because of that, they suffer because they're not good movies in themselves. And so the stories told are better off on TV.
Yeah.
As much as I would love to see movies of them, like, it's just because that's what they're making. And it's what they've turned Star Wars into.
Look, my feeling is, if you're listening to this review and you actually like Black Widow, why does every MCU movie have to be this big, bombastic, CG-filled affair? Why can't we have something more restrained with more direction to who the character actually is?
We talked about this when they said they were going to make the Moon Knight show. And I was like, Marvel, like the MCU is getting too samey. Like I said, I like the MCU. I'll continue to watch it. I'm still invested.
Yeah.
But it's too samey. It's too factory farm. It's too content driven. They need to split off into tiers. They need to do Marvel Knights, which is the violent sort of...
The Daredevil-esque.
Crazy, you know, Moon Knight, Blade, Daredevil. Do a sort of adult-oriented movie or TV show universe.
Yeah.
It can still be connected to the MCU, but you just separate it enough where families aren't going to take their kids...
Yeah.
There's no trickery.
Like a Deadpool situation.
Sort of, yeah. It's like, you know what you're getting into. If you take your kids, you know what you're getting into. Now, they can't do that because, like I said, they're playing it safe. They got to make the most money. They got to get the biggest audience. But even if you don't do that, they got to make two tiers at least. Sort of grounded heroes and the more crazy heroes.
Yeah, like your Guardians of the Galaxy
Yeah.
and your Black Widow.
Exactly. And they should exist in the same universe and be able to cross over at any point.
Yeah.
But
A different
the movies
creative approach.
themselves, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
when the Winter Soldier movie came out, we saw that, well, that was kind of like a spy espionage movie.
Yeah.
But in terms of the MCU, that movie's ancient.
Yeah.
It's not that old in terms of when it came out, but in terms of
So
how,
much has happened
how
since
far,
it was
yeah,
released,
and how
yeah.
far the MCU has come, that movie's ancient. And now we're at a point where I don't think they could ever make anything close to that.
No. Because everything has to be so big now.
Exactly.
Big and not bold is the wrong word, but there has to be some big thing to blow up.
Yeah.
There has to be
There has to be a world domination plot.
Yeah.
There has to be a superpowered villain or...
this is a problem I have with the whole of the MCU personally, and I will note that this is actually changing. By the way, the show's handling certain things which we'll go into.
Yeah.
But mostly everything has to have a scientific explanation. So I remember I
Yeah.
saw someone on Twitter today talking about
there's
how
magic in the universe.
in the original Thor movies, they tried to say that actually they're not gods. They're just like really old aliens with a
Yeah.
really high understanding of science. You look at Loki now, and it's like, no, they're gods. And it's like there's all these different multiverse
It's so
interpretations.
vague that it doesn't really
But
matter.
I was thinking about this. I'm like, what they did to Taskmaster, they just scienced it up.
Yeah.
Like,
What
I
they-
think there's not that many heroes in the MCU at the moment that are actually magic based.
Yeah,
Not that many.
I mean,
think the
you look at
problem-
even Scarlet Witch attains the majority of her powers by a scientific or material explanation.
Not really, because if it...
The cube,
Yeah, but the cube is cosmic.
same thing.
Which if that's...
Okay,
is that,
what I-
is that
my
magic or
point
is
is-
that science fiction?
It's like a I don't know. It's a
what I mean
complicated
is
grey
there's no
area.
natural superpowers.
Yeah, there's no one who just has powers.
I mean, there's maybe Doctor Strange.
But that's also because they weren't allowed to use mutants.
Yeah, but who cares about the
I
M
know what
word?
you're saying. But
Like, my
I think
point is,
it's
like-
also because like one of the problems with the MCU, like I said, all the connectedness. It's like if they introduce a character who just has powers, then you sort of have to question, well, where was that guy before? And I think that's one of the reasons I like comic books is because you just open any one of them and they'll be like just pre-established characters just rock up, and it's great. And I think the MCU has kind of painted itself into a corner where they kind of established that between Captain America going in the ice and waking up, and between and Iron Man, the origins of Iron Man and Thor coming to Earth, nothing really happened in that 70 years.
Yeah,
There were a
definitely.
few superheroes maybe active, but no.
Yeah,
And in between movies, they don't really paint a picture of there being a lot more heroes. So
yeah,
when
it's like one day things just start happening.
when Taskmaster shows up in the Black Widow movie, I'm like, are you telling me Taskmaster was only activated for this mission? If that's the case, how was he able to learn, or how was she able to learn all the moves of the heroes? Was
Yeah.
it just pre-programmed into the chip in her head?
I'm assuming it was like a Clockwork Orange situation where they're like,
That
watching,
would've- I would have liked to seen that scene.
they're watching the video, watching
That
the
would've-
big screen of all the fighting and
that would
stuff.
have been more interesting. Oh, that's another thing we have to talk about this dumb movie. So, Black Widow blows up the little girl, and then I was like, there's no way Disney's going to let her do that. And so they reveal that the little girl actually grew up and became Taskmaster, and her father put a chip in her head, and she doesn't speak, and she got a scarred face.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is dumb. And the timeline doesn't make sense because the little girl wouldn't have been that grown up. And then Black Widow's like, I'm sorry what I did to you. Can we be friends? And Taskmaster tries to kill her. And then so she sprays her with the red antidote so she's no longer mind controlled. But she has a chip in her head, which I was like, is that the same as mind control? Anyway.
Would he really have mind controlled his daughter anyway?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah, and then anyway, and then Taskmaster is like, oh, I don't want. She doesn't say this because she doesn't speak, but she's like, I don't want to kill you anymore.
Yeah, let's be friends.
And then she walks, and it's like, shake hands, and I was just like, this is so dumb. Like, this is like they're trying to introduce the family. Like, they're doing a Fast and Furious, but without the fun and without the self-awareness.
Yeah.
It's like they're introducing all these new characters in this movie that's a prequel to a movie where she dies.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I don't care about any of this.
No.
The one character you need to flesh out is Yelena, who assumedly is going to take over the mantle of Black Widow or become White Widow. If you're going to do that, make the movie about Black Widow and Yelena's relationship. Cut everything else out.
Yeah. Look, my assumption, if someone came to me and said, hey, Callum, we need you to make a movie about Black Widow. I'd be like, and we need you to establish the relationship between Natasha and Yelena because she's going to take over the reins because here's the big graph we have of where everything's supposedly going. I'd be like, okay, well, make them both go on the same mission. Yeah. That way they're together from the start. Relationship develops through the length of the movie, and it's a cool espionage movie. Roll credits.
Yeah.
And you can have Natasha kind of have not a sacrificial moment, but you can definitely have that climax where they really learn how much they love each other, and then that establishes their relationship.
Like I said earlier, they should have either started the movie and like developed Black Widow and Yelena's relationship, and then the movie becomes more about Yelena as the movie goes on. Alternatively, I think you can make a really interesting movie has a similar premise to this shit one that we got, where Yelena is mind controlled.
Yeah.
And she goes to attack Black Widow or whatever. Black Widow gives her the antidote or whatever. And you do some flashbacks showing them in the school together, how they grew up together or whatever. And that she thought Yelena was dead, and that's why she never went to look for her. And that's why she's never mentioned in any of the other MCU movies with Black Widow. But the thing in this movie is after Yelena gets out of the mind control, she just says vague things like, I didn't have a life of my own. I didn't know what I was doing. But you don't get a sense of that because she has a personality. She has a lot. She seems to have lived a life.
She's not that awkward.
Yeah. I was like, this movie, they should have just remade Universal Soldier, where the Universal Soldier is Yelena, who has been mind controlled as a mindless assassin for the last however many years of her life. And Black Widow is the reporter character from Universal Soldier who helps reacclimatize Yelena back into
the world,
the human world.
Yeah.
So Yelena could start the movie as like a mindless kind of drone, not really knowing. All she's known is killing. And Black Widow can sort of show her throughout the movie compassion and whatever.
Because they have that link too. You can see like she can say, look, I escaped it, you can too.
Exactly.
But it takes effort.
Yeah.
And then the whole movie is that development between them, her trying to coach Yelena and Yelena trying to come over to out of her shell.
Also, another problem is like in the other MCU movies, like Black Widow says, like, the Avengers is my family. I have no one else.
Yeah.
And this movie retcons that.
Yeah.
And I know they retcon it in a way where it's like, well, she didn't know about her family until just after Civil War.
It still makes a tear roll down Vin Diesel's eye.
And, and then at the end of Infinity War, when everyone gets snapped, her family could have been snapped, and so that's why she has no one left. But I'm like, it would have
been an interesting film if, because there's still, as we see in the film, there's still some programming in her about like for example, like she can't attack someone because of a certain pheromone or whatever.
But I think that's anyone who smells it. I don't think it's specifically programmed.
But you could have a situation where some type of programming wears off, and maybe she has dreams about her sister or something that she completely forgot due to the Black Widow program, and the movie is about her tracking that person down. Or, maybe fighting Taskmaster at the same time. I think
this movie's also dumb because in the canon of the movie, she already destroyed the Red Room and killed the general.
Yeah.
Who led
so it's repeating itself.
And this movie is just like, actually, the Red Room is back, the general's alive, and all the widows who you thought you freed are now just mind-controlled drones because they don't want them to escape like you did.
An interesting film.
That's interesting, but they don't really develop that.
An interesting film would be if she got information that her sister, who she forgot or whatever, was actually alive and a Black Widow. and she has the one vial to like free her sister, and then the movie is her evading Taskmaster as she's trying to get to her sister, and so you could have this really cool thriller where it's like her against Taskmaster, but cat and mouse.
Yeah.
She's just the lady, villain's Taskmaster.
Yeah.
Not just lady, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like she doesn't have like super guns or anything.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like a cross-country thriller,
Yeah.
like No Country for Old Men,
That would be
featuring
cool.
Scarlett Johansson.
But that's like I said. Like it could have been them on the run. Like Black Widow breaks out Yelena from the Red Room, and then they're on the run, and then the general guy is like, Taskmaster, I'll pay you $1 million if you go hunt him down. Something stupid like that. Whatever. Anything is better than what they did.
Yeah.
Sorry to go back and forth, but again with the TV idea, this movie really probably should have been a TV show.
Yeah.
Either an origin story of the Red Room and the Black origin story,
Yeah.
or a show called Widows and actually make it about the widows and Yelena.
It would have been cool too if you had the TV show leading up to the Black Widow movie.
Yeah.
So that establishes Yelena as a character,
But-
and then the worlds meet in the movie.
I think, and this is like what they did with this movie, like I said, is they were playing it safe and they introduced all these characters so that one day they can have a TV show, or one day they can have another movie where you have more widows, where you have Red Guardian. And I'm like, you should have just started with that.
Yeah.
You know, start with the Red Guardian TV show.
Or even have Yelena as a villain, where it's like,
Yeah.
and I mean, like maybe she survived an explosion in it's I'm blanking.
Where?
Budapest. Maybe she's who Black Widow thought she killed in Budapest,
Yeah.
and then she grows up to be Widow,
Maybe
and the whole
Dracov's daughter wasn't a little girl.
yeah.
She was already a grown woman, and
But yeah, I think it'd be cool if you had like a more time with Yelena as a villain leading up to her becoming the person she is, so she can kill Black Widow because of her own personal reasons.
That's actually another good point. Is like this movie introduces Yelena as a mind-controlled assassin, but she was killing under mind control.
Yeah.
When she's not under mind control, we don't really see her do bad things. She's still a killer. But the movie just kind of brushes over that because they got to get to the next place, and she's helping Black Widow.
You compare
At
that
the end of the movie, she's working for Valentina or whatever. So it's like, oh, she's kind of in a grey area. I'm like, what are you doing here?
Yeah, you compare it to
Pick a
Winter
lane.
Soldier. You know, all of
That's the
Bucky's
thing.
arc
Yeah.
is coming to terms with what he did when he wasn't himself.
Yeah.
Like, he feels like he has to make amends for things that he didn't have any control over.
But the Taskmaster in this movie is also a mind-controlled Winter Soldier allegory.
It seems like the Black Widows are just like, oh, well, it wasn't my fault.
Yeah.
Shrug my shoulders, blood's not on my hands.
Yeah.
Where Bucky's like racking himself with guilt.
Yeah. Because they don't have the time to develop any of these, and they introduced all these characters. You don't have the time. You know, like, it's like, I don't know.
It's indefensible.
Everything they did was wrong.
Yeah.
They really need to. They need to really
They need to get the TVA involved and erase the film.
yeah.
Erase the timeline.
Yeah, it was a branching timeline. This is a variant film. The real film is much better.
All right, like there's so many other things I want to talk about, but I think that's enough. Oh yeah. So I remember when Endgame came out, and Hawkeye and Black Widow fighting about who's going to sacrifice themselves. It's like this emotional scene, and I was like, yeah, that's great, but we've only seen Hawkeye and Black Widow together in like 2 or 3 movies, maybe. I'm like, they developed the relationship enough.
Little did we know the real sacrifice was Marvel's enthusiasm for its characters.
Yeah. They developed it enough, and it was a good scene. But I was like, they needed to develop that more. I think giving Hawkeye a secret family was weird.
I forgot about that.
And, like, I like the fact that Black Widow and Hawkeye's relationship is platonic, but it felt underdeveloped, and I felt like an easy way to overcome that was just to make them romantic interests. I know it's lazy and whatever, but in the short time that they have together on screen, it would have just been more easy. And then they tried. Joss Whedon tried to ship Black Widow and Bruce Banner.
The Hulk.
And that was weird. And so they've kind of mishandled Black Widow's relationships in a lot of ways. And like I said, she's only been in short, these characters have only been together for a short period of time when you think about it. So this movie being a standalone movie really could have used that opportunity to flesh out the relationship between Hawkeye and Black Widow. And like I said, if it came in between Infinity War and Endgame, you could have made a Budapest movie, like I said before, and really fleshed that out. I know I'm rambling and repeating myself, but there is a lot of other things I want to talk about, but I've already forgot them, and we've gone too long.
Well, apparently, they used a male stuntman for most of Taskmaster's time on screen.
Yeah,
and
of course, that guy's huge.
There's a still in Black Widow where you can see they tried to Photoshop the female actress's head onto the stuntman's body, and it looks weird. There's like a little bobblehead effect.
Yeah.
I'm like, why not just have the woman in the suit the entire time? You don't have to make
because they were doing the twist thing of like, oh, who is it?
But
I called it halfway through the movie.
You don't need to have a man in the suit to protect the twist. You know what I mean? Like, why can't it be
They didn't need the twist because this movie is stupid, and Taskmaster should have just been Taskmaster from the comics or another character completely.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, it was just stupid. Remember the whistling?
Yeah, the whistling that's never explained.
That was weird. I was like, did we miss something?
I'm feeling.
I think we missed it.
Did they whistle once at the beginning of the movie and we didn't
right
catch
at the
it?
start when they were kids, they must have whistled, and we weren't we must have not.
Our eyes were already glazed over.
Yeah, we were already boring.
Yeah,
because then they do this reoccurring whistling thing right at the end of the movie.
There was not enough work in that to pay it off. Not even close.
And then Red Guardian starts singing "Bye Bye Miss American Pie" to Yelena, and I'm like, this is so dumb. Like, this is bad. Like, whoever wrote this should be ashamed.
They're not. Like I said, they're not, because it's getting such good reviews.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, to quote The Simpsons, it is the children who are wrong.
Yeah. Like, it's bad on so many levels, and it's a shame that it is bad because fans have been asking for this for years, and they kept putting it off, and when they finally gave it to us, it was too little too late, like I said.
Yeah.
And at this point, it's kind of insulting.
Yeah, even if it was a good film, it's still too late.
Yeah. And I really like Florence Pugh as Yelena, and I would like to see her continue on in the future. And so, in that sense, I'll be happy to see when she comes back in future shows and movies. But the way they introduced her here was so poorly done, and the way they tried to shoehorn it into the timeline and tried to shoehorn it into the release schedule and tried to shoehorn in so many other characters, just so poorly handled. And like I said, the overarching MCU, we're starting to see the cracks.
Yeah.
I know I've probably said this before.
No,
and
honestly,
always,
I don't think we've talked about the MCU buckling before.
I think we've talked about fatigue at the very least.
Oh yeah, fatigue.
But
yeah.
I still like these movies. I still want to see more.
It makes me nervous.
TV shows, and we'll talk about Loki.
The TV shows are pretty successful.
I think they're holding it up.
Yeah.
At the moment, I know there was a gap because of COVID, so that's one.
But like
thing.
I said, this movie was uninspired.
Yeah.
Like Captain Marvel, some people liked it.
Unnecessary.
Yeah.
You literally could have not had this movie and had Yelena show up in another show and just had one flashback of to who she is. It would have been better than wasting all this time and money.
Yeah.
Or just wait a couple years and make a Black Widow or a Widow's TV show or a Yelena TV show.
I mean, we've got what's the next movie coming out? We've got Spider-Man,
Shang-Chi.
The
Legend of
I feel like that's going to be really bad. I really want it to be good, but I feel like it's going to drop the ball.
I think it's going to be lots of CG everywhere.
It's going to be too much CG.
got Spider-Man. We have Thor coming at some
I
point.
think Thor will be good just because of Taika Waititi.
He's
Yeah.
not. Yeah,
I feel like the movie itself doesn't really matter. It's just watching a Taika Waititi movie.
And Guardians somewhere along the line.
he's a
That's
passionate.
coming out later.
He's a passionate director. He knows what he's doing.
Doctor
Yeah.
Strange, Multiverse of Madness.
That I'm
eventually.
interested to see what they do there.
I feel like
Also,
a lot
keep
of
in mind,
they're doing a lot of work to tie into the Doctor Strange movie.
Yeah, keep in mind because this was supposed to be the cosmic phase. Remember?
Yeah.
And we were confused because we were like, well, they screwed that up because they released Captain Marvel before the end of the Infinity
I feel like they're
Saga.
almost taking a pivot
And
with
then-
the cosmic phase
And
now.
then they released Spider-Man, which wasn't part of the cosmic heroes, and then they released Black Widow, and that's not cosmic at all.
It's going to be interesting to see. What I think's happened is I feel like I'm not. This is all speculation. Obviously, I don't know what I'm talking about, but. Like with Captain Marvel, we got the sense that, well, is the cosmic phase going to be like, Captain Marvel in space with sword,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. But it's almost like we got a little bit of sword and stuff, but it's
WandaVision.
it's almost also sort of transitioning into
It's
the
the
cosmic phase going to be
multiverse.
more about multiverse?
Yeah, no, that's definitely what they're going. It's kind of combination of both. But I think what they're struggling with, or at least what I think they might be struggling with in the future, is having a balance of like street level heroes and the cosmic heroes, because I feel like they don't know how to combine them both. So because what are they going to do with Black Panther 2?
Oh, and the Eternals.
Like, but Eternals are cosmic because they're
Yeah, but that's not going to
big
be a good
space.
movie.
No, but like at least that fits into their overarching
Yeah.
cosmic arc. But Black Panther 2, it's like, can Black Panther be in space? Well, comic books, of course he can.
Yeah,
But I feel like they don't know how to handle it at the moment.
I feel like all the
Black
street
Widow-
level heroes will involve more of the sort of psychedelic multiversey stuff than space stuff.
I mean, I feel like at the moment they're just keeping them separate. Like Falcon and Winter Soldier was just about that. Black Widow was just about that. WandaVision and Loki are about the multiverse, which will tie into Doctor Strange, and Captain Marvel 2 will tie into what we saw in WandaVision and in other cosmic heroes and Eternals, obviously, stuff like that. Yeah, I don't know. This is the first time. Even after I didn't like Captain Marvel, and I really liked Endgame, but that had problems too. And even with the TV shows, it's like this is the first time I feel like I'm not sure they know what they're doing anymore.
Look, I looked up the screenwriters. The dude who actually produced the screenplay did work on WandaVision and Thor Ragnarok. But
Jack Schaefer.
He didn't
is
write.
a woman, I believe.
The person I looked at had a beard.
Oh, okay, never mind.
The person who wrote the screenplay was a male.
Jack Schaefer.
There were two people who wrote the story. So I think
Jack Schaefer did the story. Yes.
Yeah. And one of them worked on WandaVision, but apart from that, it was pretty sparse. Like nothing really sci-fi espionage. So I think maybe they were just commissioned
they get screenwriters. Like we've talked about this. I'm free to feel like we've talked about this 100 times, and I feel like we might have even talked about it last week or the week before. They get people in who their job is to write scripts. Their job isn't to make a good story. Their job isn't to write an incredible motion picture. Their job
to get it
is
done
to
within the deadline.
get it done in the deadline. Hit the beats.
Yeah.
Paint by the numbers. Keep the execs happy and in cash.
Yeah.
Um.
Well, I hope they can find that spark.
Yeah.
That's what I worry about. They need to be stricter. And I know that sounds stupid coming from me. I don't know anything about making movies. But there needs to be someone now who can say this script is not good enough.
Yeah, but because remember when, the Star Wars movies were coming out and we're like, what was her name? Kathleen Kennedy was not overseeing it in the same way Kevin Feige was overseeing the MCU. The DC guys weren't overseeing it the same way. Kevin Feige is the guy with the plan. He's the guy with the passion. But now I'm like, it's gotten too far out of hand.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone can contain it. And no one, doesn't matter the amount of knowledge or passion you have for comic books and these movies. It's just like, it's too much now.
Yeah.
I don't know. We're saying all this. We'll see what happens when the next movie.
Yeah, they
Marvel
might
movie
turn it all
comes
around
out.
and
It'll
we'll
turn
be
it all
apologizing.
around, yeah. And like I said, Thor, I just want to see it. So, yeah, like, And like I said, like I like these movies. I will continue to watch them. You're like I always say, you're either in or you're out, and I'm in. I'm worried because I love these heroes. I love these comic books. I love this series of movies.
But at the end of the day, we have a turd. You know what I mean? Nothing
I
anybody...
I will probably never rewatch this movie.
No, me neither. Nothing anybody says, paid or otherwise, can change the fact that this movie is just elementally shit.
Yeah. It's a bad movie regardless of whether it's a comic book movie or whatever. Like, it's just a bad movie.
So it's like, the MCU going forward, I hope it's amazing. Yeah. But they used to have, like, for me personally, the MCU used to be have an incredibly high standard.
We won't talk about this now. We might do a whole episode on it. We might talk about it but we won't talk about it now. But I just want to bring it up. I miss the days before the MCU.
Oh yeah, we've talked about this briefly.
I feel like superhero movies were better before Iron Man came out.
Yeah,
there's been great ones since then. I think there's been great MCU movies.
We have waxed poetic before about pre and post superhero movies.
Yeah, maybe we'll do an episode on one day.
The MCU pretty much destroyed Hollywood in a sense.
Oh, it did. It destroyed cinema in a sense.
Yeah. Single-handedly.
It is.
I love the MCU, but I also hate the MCU.
We talked about Fast and Furious not that long ago, and it worked for
everything
works for the Fast and Furious, movies, but everything has to turn into superhero.
They turned Star Wars into superhero movies, and they turned everything into franchise episodic content.
Yeah.
It's no longer about making a good movie. It's about how much content can we get out of this? How much can we stretch this? And that's why I think these shows... These movies would be better on TV, and that's why the Marvel shows have so far been pretty good. And The Mandalorian was better than the movies.
Yeah, what a
because they're the way they make these movies is better for like cheap disposable TV.
Yeah,
because they're not treating them as movies.
Yeah,
they're treating them as content to release over weeks to make money and to generate buzz and to get subscriptions and stuff. So they're not movies anymore. That's a problem. Well, anyway, we'll ramble on too long. I apologize. This was a bad episode.
Black Widow sucks. Don't recommend
Black Widow sucks, and this review sucks even more because I rambled on too much. But we did something that I haven't seen anyone else do, is actually talk about the problems in the movie.
Yeah.
And the problems with the MCU. Because most people are loving this movie because anything MCU does, they'll blow smoke. But anyway.
Yeah, look, as you said, we will review how we actually see the film. We'll talk about how we view the film. And this is not a positive film. Not a positive review. Not a good film, I should say. I think hopefully we'll have better words to say next week about Loki.
Yep.
Which will be our next week.
Unless they screw up the ending.
Unless they monumentally wreck it.
Yeah.
Even if they screw up the ending, it'll still be mostly a positive
5
review.
episodes would have been good.
Alrighty, that's all for this week. We're all exhausted and hungry in the studio
Apologies, everyone. This review sucked. I ruined it.
To be fair,
the movie sucked.
It was soul crushing. It was soul crushing because we all had high hopes.
Actually, when we watched it, we paid for premiere access. I was glad we didn't go to the movies.
We did the right thing though.
Watch it at Callum Nathan's house on the projector.
It was still good.
I was like, 1, I still feel bad for paying for it, and 2, I was just like leaving you guys' house, and I was just like, I'm so disappointed.
Yeah,
it's like,
he just sat in his car for 5 minutes.
It's not like we have any...
Drove home with like no music on, just silence.
It's not like we were invested in it being a bad movie, Yeah. It's like I wanted it to succeed.
I wanted it to be good. I was like, Black Widow.
Because there's not that many great espionage movies, and she's the perfect character for an espionage.
Yeah, for the MCU
franchise.
This is their spy movie. They screwed it up.
That's all for this week, everybody. Please like and share the Tuesday Review Facebook page. The Twitter, the Instagram,
rate, review,
subscribe. You can find
the Apple Podcasts and on the Spotify and on your regular podcast app.
Adios, cousins.